Hey there, everyone, and welcome to You Gotta Meet. I am your host, Stuart Knight, and today I am joined by an awesome business leader who has held positions as a director, controller, senior manager, and is currently a partner at KPMG, that very large company. See how I rhyme that? Now, you will soon learn a lot more about this incredible woman as she has agreed to show authentic leadership in action by choosing to go a little deeper and embrace the human connections we should all have at work and in life. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, you got to meet Andrea MacDonald. Andrea, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is so great. You know, the thing that makes this podcast, I think, extra special today is that you and I are coming face to face for the second time in our lives. And the first time was on a plane from Toronto to New York. We were sitting
Yeah,
next to each other.
a very unusual meeting.
An unusual meeting, to say the least. And usually, when two people meet on a plane, the second time they meet is not on a podcast. Does that
That's true.
freak you out at all, or is this like
No,
just
and I mean, as I was getting ready to come onto this podcast, I was thinking about that because I was trying to remember how we started chatting because you go on so many flights. I'm sure
right?
you go on more than most, and sometimes you just sit there for it could be 2 hours, 5 hours, whatever it is, and you don't speak. But I'm trying to remember how we got chatting, and then we ended up obviously having a lot in common, which yeah, we can chat about later. But I'm trying to remember how we first started. Was it you? I feel like maybe it was you
Well,
instigating the chatting.
often it is. And I always have this thing that when I sit on a plane for the very first time next to somebody, I think at the bare minimum, we owe it to each other to at least say hello.
Yeah.
Especially our shoulders are practically touching.
Yeah.
And so I always say, hi, how are you? And the person might say hello back. But people don't believe this about me, is that someone who makes a living as a speaker, someone
Yeah.
who loves human connection, has built a company around human connection in the corporate workplace. And yet sometimes I just do not want to speak to the person sitting next to me.
I get that.
I just want my quiet time
Yeah.
and to put my headphones on. So you and I started a short conversation, and it was very quick, simply because you said we had so much in common. And what I liked about you immediately, though, is that how real you were. Especially when I found out what you do for a living, I thought, many could misconstrue somebody who's a partner at KPMG as being perhaps conservative, corporate, but you are, the opposite to that. You are,
One of my fatal flaws is that I tend to overshare. Sometimes I feel like it can be a good thing, and sometimes yeah, to my detriment if I just keep talking and don't stop.
how are you perceived in the corporate world as somebody who perhaps sometimes is non-corporate?
Yes, that is, yeah, it's a good question. I think about that often because I do have a lot of teams that I manage, of all different levels. So, from people who have just graduated from university up to, my colleagues that are other partners at the firm. And I'm always curious if they think of me on an initial kind of meeting as scary or intimidating. And so I guess I just like to make sure that's not the case because I feel like I'm sure this fits in with your world well, is that like we are all just people. And just because I have a title that I guess for, whatever reason is more maybe prestigious than, somebody who's just graduated from university, like we're all just people all going through our days. And so I don't really like to operate my day to day under any sort of, intimidation or kind of flexing my power muscles. Like I really just feel like in the corporate world, like the best way to get things done is as a team. And like if we don't all work together and we don't all do our parts, then we can't accomplish our goals. And so I hope that I don't come off as intimidating, because I am just a normal person.
Right. Well, it's interesting. When I do work with a lot of my clients, one of the things I point out to them is the statistic that says 57% of people, when asked, said that they would turn down a job that paid them more money compared to the job that they were at if it meant losing the current relationships they have where they are
Oh,
working.
interesting.
Yeah, so people, it just goes to show, will always gravitate to people. And
Yeah.
I often say in my corporate keynotes, I'll say, people don't leave jobs, they leave people.
Yeah.
And so, from that perspective, we need to remind ourselves, from a managerial perspective or from a senior leadership perspective, how important it is for the people that work for us or who work with us
Yeah.
to like us and to feel like we are no different than who they are. And for that reason, to know that they can come to us with their issues and they can
Yeah.
be honest and real, and they can give constructive criticism for whatever it may be, the things that make great teams or great tribes, as we often say. So I think it's great that they're like that. I think a lot of people wouldn't be like that for fear of losing the power dynamic and for another person seeing them as a friend as opposed to a boss. Have you ever worried about that or thought about that?
Yeah, I think that's very interesting. I think there's times and places, right? Like there are situations where you do have to be the authority because you have to make a hard decision. Whether that be like with a specific client or like if it's with team dynamics or whatever it might be. So there's situations where you do have to sort of use your authority to make sure, a situation is under control and it is work and we are colleagues. But I think to your point, like I like to just make sure it's an environment where people can share their ideas, and feel like they can collaborate and they can say sort of their opinions on things without fear of it being kind of knocked down or not listened to or considered. So yeah, I think there's times and there's places where it works. And then I think my general style, which to your point might be different from other leaders in the accounting field, is I like to make sure everybody feels included and that it is, a team environment and that we're all working together. And I
Yeah.
think that helps people kind of bring their best self to work too. So yeah, I mean, I'm still learning and growing and evolving, so I definitely don't have it all figured out. But I think one of the things that I've always kind of lived by is I'm just me. I don't have, and this could be something that is, more difficult for women, given, the challenges that sometimes women face in corporate world is I don't have like a corporate face and like another face. Like I'm just me, which is maybe a little different from others. I can't imagine like being somebody else for 9-10 hours of the day and then having
Oh,
to be like the real me later. I'm just like, you get what you get, and if you don't like it, then that's fine.
yeah.
Not everyone's gonna gel with everyone else. But
Yeah.
yeah, I just like I can't imagine like trying to pretend all day to be somebody that I'm not.
It's got to be so exhausting. I can only imagine. And for that reason, as cliche as it may sound, like you are going to have that final breath on planet Earth one day. And I would imagine that, the best person to look back and see is the person that you actually are, as opposed to the person you were trying to be. So
Yeah.
I think you've made a good decision there. So speaking of you and the person that you bring to the world, now let's just jump right into an authentic life question, and I know it's one that
Okay.
most people don't like to answer, but I'm going to ask you anyway. What is something that you love about yourself? I mean, and it's okay. You can completely brag here. This is the bragging show. It's not you got to meet. It's the bragging show.
Okay, well, that is a hard question. But I think my answer would be sort of along the same lines of what we're talking about, is that I think I just am authentically me, and I'm very honest. I like to think that I'm empathetic and understanding, and I'm curious about other people. It's funny. We didn't go over this, but one of the things that we connected on when we met on the plane was that we went to the same university,
Yeah.
which was
Wilfrid Laurier.
Wilfrid Laurier, which, yes, I look back so fondly on my 4 years at Laurier. And I remember my friends always teasing me in university because we'd be at Wilf's. Was Wilf's
I love
regular
it.
establishment?
I love it. This is like one of those like you in a weird way as kind of gauging how old I am. Yes. You know
I
what? Yeah, bricks and mortar, they existed when I was in university.
Well,
And
maybe it had a
there were
different
bars.
name, or
I know,
I
I
don't
know.
know.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Yeah, Wells was a Wednesday night hangout.
Okay, so I can't remember if it was Tuesday or Wednesday, but there was a night with live music.
Mhm.
Everybody was there every week. And My friends would always tease me because I'd always be like sitting down at a table with like somebody new, and they'd always say that I was like life chatting because I like genuinely am curious about other people and I want to like know more about them and learn more about them. And I think that is sort of along the same lines as what we were talking about. I think it's one of the things that makes me a good leader is that I care and I want to know, and I want to know what's going on in your life. And I'm just like curious about people, and I'm very, very honest. So
Mm.
I find through my relationships with friends, even, certain colleagues that I feel comfortable with, like it's almost like a form of therapy for me. I overshare, I explain everything. By talking is how I deal with problems and solve them and gather information from other people. And so I think I'm very honest and I'm very open. And I think certain people find that relatable,
Right.
and feel like they can confide things in me and talk to me because I come off as vulnerable and share my vulnerabilities. So then other people feel like they also kind of feel safe to do that.
Yeah, I
So, which
I
is
think about this a
really
lot.
interesting.
I think about this a lot with respect to when I speak to my clients about inclusion and diversity. Of course, we
Yeah.
know this is such and belonging, and this is such an important topic in any business. Yet I feel like so many of my clients, they approach things from a way that doesn't necessarily achieve it. And I always say, one of the number one things that you can do to start cultivating an environment of inclusion
Yeah.
and belonging is to get curious
Yeah.
about each other, the way that you were just mentioning, and how, when you do ask people questions about their life and about their past and about their fears and about their dreams and goals,
Yeah.
quickly you start discovering that you do both have the goal of traveling to the same country one day, or that you both love the same favorite band, or that
Yeah.
you both have grew up with parents that were divorced when you were 15 years old. And all of a sudden, the person of color and or the person of a different sexual orientation, or a younger or older or a different socioeconomic background, whatever it may be, you start bringing different groups of individuals who see each other as other to have a
Mhm.
conversation where they discover that they in fact have way more in common than they have differences.
Yeah.
Now you start having real inclusion, and you can't get there unless you carve out time and space for people to get curious about each other.
Yeah.
I often say that you know human beings are the best television show of all time. All you have to do is ask the right questions and just flip around from channel to channel. And it's amazing that you do that, because what you're doing is, as you know, I don't have to tell you this, but you're making people feel seen. And that's really
Yeah.
comes down to.
Yeah. And I think it's funny you say I went to a concert last week, and it's this relatively unknown new artist, but I swear to you, in like 5 years, he's going to be everywhere. And I was telling everyone, and I was missing a work event for it, so I was getting a lot of flack. And I was like, but I really want to go to this concert. And everyone's like, I have no idea who this is. And then I was chatting with one of my staff, and he was asking me and I told him I was going to this concert. And he was like, oh my God. He's like, he is amazing. He was like, I can't wait. Like, I wish I was there. I wish I could see him. And I couldn't help but think back on that conversation. I actually ran into him today, and I was telling him all about the concert, how amazing it was. And it's something that like we would originally probably seem so far apart in our interests, just probably even just like the age gap between us. I mean, I'm sure he's probably 25 or something much younger than I am. But that one little thing kind of brought us together, and it's probably something we'll chat about in the elevator or the water cooler whenever I see him. And so
Yeah.
yeah, I do think it really creates like a level kind of playing field, which is nice.
Yeah.
In an ordinary, sometimes corporate world cannot feel so level, and so yeah, I guess that's what I'm trying to do.
Well, I feel this is true even amongst friendships or people who are in relationships with each other. I can't tell you how often I've been sitting around with a husband and wife, and we're having dinner, we're hanging out, and I just ask one of them a question that's just
Yeah.
popped into my head, and the other person turns and says, I never even knew that about you.
Yeah.
And I find myself thinking, how did you guys have been married for 20 years? How'd you not know that information? And again, we fail often in our own relationships to ask each other great questions. And if
Yeah.
that's in our closest relationships, how can it not play out in our everyday busy lives at work? And so I think it's really cool that you had that experience. Now, you you've had an interesting life and you've got to this really great position now at KPMG, but along the way, like anyone who's kind of climbing that ladder and hitting their next targets of success, have you ever had moments where you've doubted yourself? Even though you're confident with who you are, have you ever thought, oh, I don't know, and doubted your abilities even? And how did you deal with that if that's the case?
Yes, absolutely, as I'm sure everyone does. I guess there's a few things that I would touch on. Um, when I first left KPMG, I started my career right out of school after I graduated from Laurier at KPMG, got my CPA. And I decided to make the move to switch into industry, which is pretty common. People will come to the firm, get their designation, and then try to see what else is out there. And I think, I was young. This was the only job I had ever had. And the first move that I made, it was pretty apparent early on that culturally it was not the right fit, which was really interesting to me because having KPMG been my first job and my first career, I didn't know what it was about KPMG that worked or didn't work because it was the only place I had ever worked. And I went to this new spot and it really made me realize how important the people, and I think you touched on this earlier, the people that I worked with, like I had so many good friendships, like people that I met, the first day of my job at KPMG are still, well, one of them I went to the concert with last week. So those were friendships that, were around me every single day. And I think I underestimated the value of that to me personally. And I know everybody is different, but I know for me, if I'm going to choose to be here for so many hours of the day away from, at the time I didn't have family, but now that I do, I need to make sure that I'm in a place where I'm surrounded by people that I like working with, that I'm learning from, and that I'm growing, and that I can confide in. So for me personally, that was a really, really important move. And so I knew very quickly that I wasn't in the right spot and had to kind of pivot. To make a move to somewhere that was a better fit.
Mhm.
Another time that I would I guess touch on was after I had my first child. So when I had my daughter and I returned to work, this is in a pre-COVID era, and I know lots of things in the workplace have shifted post-COVID, but as soon as I got back, I knew that something had kind of fundamentally shifted in the way I was viewing my job and my work and my life. And I think people who have kids and in the past have had to kind of pretend. I think there's this phrase where you have to work like you're not a parent and parent like you don't have a job, or there's a phrase
Mhm.
along those lines. I'm probably botching it. But I knew for me, like I all like I'm a mom now, and I still want to be an employee, and I know I can be a good employee, but I need to have boundaries so that I can do both. Like I can't work 12 hours a day. Like, I don't want to miss dinner. I don't want to miss pizza day at school. Like, there's things that I knew that I wanted to do. And in this job, I wasn't going to be able to do it. It was just too much. And there was just not enough time for me to be around. And so, one thing that I did at that point was I got a career coach, pretty soon after I returned to work from my first mat leave. And I think that's something that I don't know how many people utilize in their careers. I know therapy is at some point was very taboo, and now it's, very commonplace. And I think it's curious that people don't also utilize that in their career when they don't feel like they're in the right spot, or they want to make a change, or they have questions. I've had a few different career coaches, one through KPMG, one that I got on my own. And they're fantastic in helping you just like organize your thoughts and figure where your strengths are and like which organizations align with your strengths, and there's honestly just so many benefits to it. And so those were a
100%.
few moments where I definitely doubted where I was, and I guess some of the things that I did to kind of fix the situation.
It's funny how many people will beat themselves up for being in what is considered the not the most optimal place. Oh,
Yeah.
I put myself into this job or I put myself in this position, as opposed to just giving themselves the grace of being human
Yeah.
and stepping back from the picture and asking themselves, how can I move to where I want to be? And
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. I feel like it should be the law that everyone has to have a mentor on
Oh, for
on
sure.
some level. I always remember reading something from Anthony Robbins when I first started getting into motivational books a million years ago, and he said, if I want, I can be the best cook at any time. All I have to do is stand next to the best cook. And he
Yeah.
talked about, if he or she puts the oven on to 400, I'll put the oven on to 400. If they chop things a certain way, I'll just watch them and chop things a certain way. If I just
Yeah.
mimic everything they do, my dish will come out pretty well, almost as good as what they've made, even if I've never taken a cooking class in my life.
Yeah.
And I've always seen mentorship through that lens,
For sure.
through my life because of that. Now, when you think about where you are today, I always think it's interesting because almost none of us land where we thought we would land in life, especially when we were a child. What did you want to be when you were a little kid? Did you want to be like in a circus or what?
I know. I saw that question and do you know what? I was not one of those kids. I think about this often. I was not one of those kids that had these like grand dreams of like being an astronaut. It's funny, even now that I am, married with children, I definitely wasn't one of those people that like dreamed of the day, my wedding day,
Right.
um, or of being a mother. I was just kind of knew it was going to happen, but I wasn't like waiting and itching for it. And so I probably don't have the best answer to this question because I feel like there's been strategic elements to like things that I've done and how I've gotten where I've gotten, but I didn't like set out on this path, if that
Mhm.
makes sense.
Do you feel like,
Um,
well, then when you were growing up as a kid, was it more of a case where you came from a family that essentially maybe set you up to have at least the mentality that you could create a particular kind of life that you wanted once you got to that juncture in your life? Like you could do whatever you wanted to do. Was that more of the situation?
think I grew up in a much more practical household,
Yeah.
just given like the background of my family, like very working class. Everybody worked very hard to kind of get where they were, and maybe, not a lot of wealth, a lot of, yeah. So I think I was taught to work hard and to be practical in my decisions. So maybe that's why I wasn't dreaming of being an astronaut because I feel like there was an element that was instilled in me of like, you've got to get a job. And, I always had a job in high school and job in university. And I think it was more just work hard. So maybe I was a bit too practical to be too big of a dreamer.
I went
Maybe
through the
that's a little
same.
sad, but
Well, look,
it's true.
our background is very similar that way. I come from immigrant parents. It's the classic
Yeah.
immigrant story. They came to this
Yeah.
Canada with $150 in their
Yes.
pocket.
It's a different mentality, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's really like you're at the dinner table. You're not told to be an astronaut. You're told you better just get to college or university
Yes.
and get a degree and get a good job and start
Yes.
saving.
Exactly.
It's not until
Oh,
later in life we start actually having a little bit of some dreams popping in.
yeah, it's interesting though now raising children, trying to figure out exactly how, you want to approach that topic too, because I think there is something special about being a little bit of a dreamer. I've always been like very practical and
Yeah.
very focused. And
Mhm.
so I think that there is something nice about, living a little bit outside of that like practical, functional world.
Yeah, it's always going to be a bit of a yin and yang is to find that middle ground.
Yeah.
So now I'm guessing though, it sounds like I don't know, I have a feeling that you enjoyed your childhood and what when you look back at your childhood, what's something that you cherish or something that you look back and puts a smile on your face?
It's funny. I also have been thinking a lot about this now that I'm raising children. I think it's just that classic like 80s, 90s childhood where we were just outside all the time. Like all the children on the street would usually congregate at our house and we were, I played a lot of sports growing up, so we had a basketball net. We'd be like shooting hoops or I played hockey growing up, so we would be like, shooting pucks in the net or playing tag in the neighborhood. And I'm really just trying, I know we live in a very different world right now, but I'm trying to instill that as much as possible in my children as
Yeah.
well, because I know there's lots of other competing forces that I think just weren't there when we were younger. Like, I think
Yeah.
you just, when you got home from school, you just went outside and you ran around and you played.
Totally.
And I think there's something kind of special about that.
There
I'm really
is.
grateful for of having that experience.
I was just talking to somebody on a podcast recently, and he was explaining how he had this real joy when he was growing up that he was taken off into his grandparents' farm in
Yeah,
Georgia. And they had a 13-acre farm. And he said, it was the classic experience that, in his case, a young boy dreamed of climbing things, jumping off of
yeah,
things into hails of. And I was
right.
telling him, I said, I grew up in a small town where I learned how to swim in a river. I mean,
Yeah,
that was just par for the course in the world that I grew up in. And
yeah,
and I as a parent too feel what you go through, which is, and I'm located right in the heart of Manhattan in New York
yes.
City. It's like good luck finding a patch of grass around here.
Yeah, we
And,
talked about this.
oh God, it really pains me to the point where I don't even know how long I can continue that specifically for what I want for my children. Of course, there's lots of great things that they get from being here, but for me, I really do think that we need to stop and question this because I read something recently that there was a study that has been done where they compared kids who had been super involved in ballet and piano and soccer and all these after school programs compared to kids that for the most part just came home after school and just played. And it turns out that
Yeah,
the kids who are super involved don't do any better in
yeah,
college and university than the kids who don't. We always think we have to get them so set up for life.
yeah,
And yet you and I did exactly the same stuff, road hockey every
yeah.
day. And like we seem to turn out just okay, just fine.
Yeah, I mean, I've also thought a lot about that. I think there was an element of COVID sort of halted things for a little while.
Mhm.
And I think they're here anyways in Toronto. I felt like people were trying to play catch up. It was like you felt like your kid missed, the skating lessons or the swimming lessons. So then we sort of emerged and everybody overprogrammed their children. And I'm actually, to your point, I'm kind of pedaling back on that because I was just finding it too exhausting. We were too overscheduled. There was too much going on. And I was like, I just want my kids to run around and jump on the trampoline in the backyard. And like, we are like, I'm super grateful. We live in a very lovely neighborhood, a little suburb outside of the city.
Mm,
And there's no sidewalks on the streets. The kids are scooting and biking. There's parks really close by. And so we're trying our best to give our kids that kind of like classic, old school childhood as long as we can. I mean, there's probably only so long we can control it. They're still pretty little.
yeah,
But yeah, there's something special about that.
no question. No question. Now that you are a parent, how do you see your own parents differently, or do you see the way that they parented differently now that you've actually had the experience that they had?
Yes, I feel
Yeah.
like okay, I was a pretty good kid, so I feel like I didn't give my parents too much trouble. But obviously just so grateful for so many elements of my upbringing. I think I grew up in, a relatively small town as well compared to, Toronto and New York. And it was just simple. I think it was just like a simple kind of upbringing. There was nothing too complicated. We had like a paper route, and to
Hmm.
your point, we'd play hockey in the streets and basketball, and they were very involved. They both worked really hard to give us a really good life, but they were around. They were at our, baseball games and our basketball games, and my mom was always at the school, and so yeah, I think back on that, and it's funny. I just enrolled my daughter in t-ball for the first time, and I'm coaching her t-ball team, which is hilarious
I
because
love
my
it.
dad always coached my team.
Yeah.
And we went out, we got all the stuff, and she's like hitting balls off the tee. And I was like, this is really cool because grandpa used to, coach my team when I was younger. And she's like, well, when I have kids and I can coach their team. And it's just
Yes,
so fascinating the way it all works. Like the
it
things that you
is.
instill in the things your parents instilled in you, then you're passing on to your kids and they're passing on to theirs.
I
So yeah,
know.
I mean, I had a very simple kind of upbringing,
Mhm.
but yeah, it was great. I'm very appreciative of my parents,
Totally.
especially now that I know.
Oh
however.
God. I caught myself the other day. I thought it was so funny. We stopped off at like a little kind of Holiday Inn Express, one of those hotels where it was just we needed a place to crash. And within about 30 minutes, of course, you get into the hotel, the kids are begging, can we go to the pool? And so we go down to the pool, and my partner and I, pull a couple of chairs up to the side of the pool, and we got our coffee cups filled with red wine. And we're just sipping the red wine and we're watching the kids play. And I thought, oh my God, I have become
I
my
know.
parents. This is exactly what my parents used to do when we used to go into a pool. They would sit there. My dad would have
So
scotch
sad, but
in the
so true.
in a coffee cup. I'm like, I was not supposed to do this.
I know. We
But you know
weren't
what?
supposed to be here.
Yeah, we became
No, it
those
just
people.
happens. It's weird.
It's life. It's life. Now,
Weird.
but the thing I'm hearing from you is that, even with simple upbringings and even with working class parents, the one thing that we were so lucky to have was love
Yeah.
and to be so loved. Now, when you think about love as a word today, how do you define love and how do you choose to show it to in the world that you live in, wherever you happen to be?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think right now in the stage of life that I'm in, the way that I show love to my family is I like by doing. I feel like I'm like the person, the kind of center that keeps everybody together in terms of just like scheduling and making sure we have groceries and all the simple things. I think it's a lot of like doing and just being around and being present and being attentive. I know we live in a very phone-based digital world, but trying to be present, putting my phone away when I'm with my kids, and just kind of being and doing. I don't know if
Yeah.
that's the right answer, but I guess I think about love, I think about my family, and I guess I'm just in that stage with little kids that I'm just constantly doing. And so I think
Yeah.
that's the way in the current moment I'm showing my love.
Well, it's so incredible. Even just the act of making lunches is
Yeah.
such a beautiful act of showing love. And one of the things
Do
that
we have a choice?
yeah, I know, right? Yeah, there's no choice but to love them. I have been introducing the word love more often now, just recently with my corporate clients, just testing the
Oh,
waters
interesting.
and
Okay.
asking the question, do you show love to your colleagues, to your clients, and getting them to realize that there are various ways in which we can show love. I'm not talking about, of course, the love between a parent and a child or between two
Yeah.
partners, but just saying, what you just mentioned is that thing of showing up and being there
Hmm.
for a colleague in the same way that you're going to be there and sitting in the stands,
Fascinating.
for your child's basketball game. And I'm testing it to see whether or not I'm able to start infusing this word because I think that it's a space that we feel like it shouldn't be there, but I think it can be there.
Yeah, it's really interesting you say that. Because I think you're right. I think a lot of the things you do for your colleagues, um, and your teams can definitely, it has all the qualities of love, but it's interesting because you would almost never use that word,
No.
but it is there, right? I think
Yeah.
it's definitely there. And you build those relationships even with, you were talking about mentorship and, your certain mentors and the people that like you go to with all your problems, if it's, you need to vent or,
Hmm.
your tears or whatever it is. So yeah, I definitely think it's there,
Yeah.
but I don't know. I mean,
It's
you know me, I'd be very happy to use it, but I feel like everyone would look at me like that I had three eyes, but it's
yeah.
there.
Yeah. I
Definitely
mean,
there.
well, so my brother, I remember him saying something to me that really stuck with me. And I mean, I don't think I'm saying anything that a lot of people haven't heard. He says, but when back to the parenting thing, he said, children spell love Time.
Yeah,
And right.
yeah,
And I was like, oh, yeah, that's true. They just want your time.
for
But
sure.
isn't that true for all of us? We
Yeah,
just want that time. And so isn't that how we all spell love?
yeah,
And I thought about this and I even was thinking about renaming, or not, sorry, naming a new keynote I'm working on. And I had this kind of clever title. It was going to be, You're going to love this. But the whole thing I was going to be talking about was bringing love to the workplace
yeah.
through the importance of human connection. But I guess I'll test the waters, and if I go
Yeah,
bankrupt,
what were your other responses? I'm curious to know.
Same as yours, right? In the sense that people were open to it, but at the same time aware that the
Hmm.
realities of the world we live in is that a lot of people are still somewhat standoffish of anything too woo-woo
Hmm.
and too, kumbaya. And so, like anything, though, I think you always need someone who's willing to jump in the deep end first, and
Yeah.
before something becomes mainstream. So,
I mean, I think it probably is love, but people just don't want to use that word for it. I don't know
yeah,
why,
I know.
but people are probably just hesitant. But yeah, it's an interesting question. I've never been asked that before.
Yeah, we'll have to see where it goes. So
Yes.
when you look back now at all these decisions that you've made and experiences that you've had, what is one decision that pops out where you say that was a really great decision, like a bit of a game changer for you?
Okay, this one might be strange,
Okay.
but I do think my decision to go to Laurier
Okay.
really changed the trajectory of my life in a very, very positive way. Um, I feel like when I went to school, I met my people. Like where I grew up, I was actually really very shy growing up. My parents always tell this one story over and over again about me being I was such a shy child. And I do really think I just didn't find my people in high school. And when I went away to school, I don't know if it's the act of like physically leaving home and being at school. I did transitionally, there's always challenges when originally move away and you're living on your own and you're fending for yourself. But I eventually really found a home there in the friendships that I made. This was almost, 20 years ago now, and the friendships that I made in university are still, my best friends to this day, the people that I call and confide in about everything. And I do really think they changed the trajectory of me as a person. I think they helped me build my confidence. They really helped me find love. Like I feel like we have a chat and we call ourselves soulmates. Because like we've been through so many things together. Like we've been
Yeah.
through, makeups and breakups and engagements and showers and bachelorettes and weddings and kids and even now like the death of parents, and like we have been through literally everything together, and these girls are truly my soulmates, in addition to my partner. But
Mhm.
yeah, I feel really grateful. I know not everybody had that same experience at university, and I feel very lucky to have
Yeah.
had that experience for the
I don't
people.
I don't think people take friendship seriously enough.
Oh,
Uh,
really?
I don't.
Oh, I do.
I think that people, if they find themselves having an experience like the one that you just described,
Hmm.
that they've won the lottery of friendships,
Yeah.
and that they didn't maybe necessarily need to put a whole lot of work into it. I mean, you're always putting work into relationships, but
Sure.
you found this group, you found your tribe, and you've now gone through life now for the last however many decades together. However, when people don't find themselves in those situations, I don't see them placing the same level of emphasis in trying to create a tribe or to
Hmm.
find the right kinds of friends,
Yeah.
their own people, as much as I think they should. And I think it's because people don't realize the vital role that friends play in our lives, whether it's support through a difficult time, whether it's
Yeah.
finding a job when we need one, whether it's
Yeah.
just giving us a laugh at the end of a tough week. And people will put more effort and energy into the place where they live or the place that they work or even their own
Mhm.
bloody vacation
Yeah.
than they do in creating really meaningful friendships. And when they have friendships, I find they don't place enough effort into cultivating those relationships by really asking the kinds of questions that allow people to go deeper with each other because it's the greatest place
That's so
to
good.
to grow and to expand and to think more deeply on big subjects. And if all we do is just talk about our latest golf game,
Yeah.
right, we're not going there. So it's so important to have great
Oh yeah.
friends.
Well, I've reflected on this, and I grew up with a brother, and I didn't have any cousins, and I was thinking about this weekend as we were spending time with family, and we're super lucky in that on both sides of our family, all of the kids are around the same age. And I said to my daughter, who's 7, and she has cousins almost her same age on both sides, and they have the best time together. And I said to her, I was like, you're so lucky that
Mhm.
you have these cousins, because there's something about family that if you are lucky enough to find friends that are like family, like you said, I don't think that happens, and I feel really grateful because I know that I did. But I said to her, something about family that is just there's this inherent kind of comfortness. It's comfortable,
Yeah.
and you can be yourself without being judged. And I just
Mhm.
said you're so lucky to have these cousins that you get along, and it's so nice to see them get along so well. But for me, I almost had to go and kind of seek it out, and I didn't find it in high school. I just didn't kind of mesh. And I was one of the few people that kind of left and never really went back to my hometown. And I think in university I was looking for that, and I knew that I needed that in my life. And I am very cognizant of how important it is to have female friendships in
Mhm.
my life. And so yeah, I feel very grateful. They're like the first people that I call with pretty much everything.
Yeah.
And there's distance between us now and, whatever else, but we still make sure to see each other and talk to each other. And yeah, I don't know how to like, I don't know how you go through life without something. I mean, maybe you
Well,
have a sister or cousin but
yeah.
because I don't have that, I'm so grateful.
Well, loneliness research has now been described in not having meaningful connections in one of three categories of your life. The
Yeah.
first is not having a connection to your closest confidant, which is in many cases an intimate partner, but it could
Yeah.
also be a sister, brother, whatever. The second is not having meaningful relationships with your community.
Yeah.
And the third is friendships.
Yeah.
So even if one of those categories is awry, you can have that feeling of loneliness, which is just essentially lack of connection. And so we need to make sure that we are, really cultivating those incredible relationships with our friends. And so now, when you think about, we're talking a lot about great decisions that you've made, and we've talking about how things have gone down a path for you that have really led you to where you are, and somewhat a level of serendipity almost. Do you look back though and find yourself ever thinking about certain things you kind of regret, things you maybe you wished you did differently, even though you've made a lot of great decisions?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I'm curious about, and I don't actually know the right answer, is I feel like in my 20s, kind of early 30s, I worked really, really hard. I didn't have a lot of hobbies. I definitely spent a lot of time, pre all of us, getting engaged and getting married and moving in with our partners. We spent a lot of time together. Our friend group kind of all moved from Waterloo to Toronto, and we were all here, doing what you should be doing in your 20s. And
Yeah.
but I worked a lot, and I'm very curious because I find this new generation is putting a lot more priority on balance. I
Hmm.
feel like when I look back on that stage, it wasn't very balanced. Like I didn't necessarily have like a hobby. I always loved and was very fueled by exercise. So I did a lot of yoga and running. But it was a lot of work. I worked a lot. And
Hmm.
so, yeah, I'm curious if I were to do it again and sort of take the more new age mentality of prioritizing, you know, life a little bit more over work, if
Yeah.
that would have had a different outcome. But I don't know. Um, no real regrets, if I'm being
Mhm.
honest. I'm just more curious
Yeah.
if yeah, my life would have had a different trajectory had I maybe just chilled out a little bit.
It's funny how culturally pressurized we are when it comes
Yeah.
to the
Oh my
topic
God.
of work. I
Oh
go
yeah.
through this as an entrepreneur once in a while, especially when spring turns into summer, when you start getting those first warm days.
Yes.
I will find myself deliberately slacking off and whatever. I go for a walk, I go for a bike ride, and the guilt I
Yeah.
feel. I think I only did a 5 hour day today. Instead
Yeah.
of like congratulating myself and like,
Fascinating.
isn't it nuts? It's like we just constantly feel like we should be doing something else.
Yeah, my partner and I talk about it all the time. It's this weird mentality. If you're not like going at 100 miles an hour and it's, maybe you have a day at 60, yeah, you feel guilty. You feel like you're not doing enough. If it's like you're not doing enough at home or not doing enough at work. And yeah, it is. We are programmed that way in a weird, but it's kind of breaking the programming. And as I get older, I think I was reading something that said, as you enter your 40s, it's this new kind of age of reflection. And I find I've been doing a lot of that now that I'm kind of out of that crazy stage with young children. And
Hmm.
you're reflecting and you're kind of like, why do we do the things that we do? And why are
Totally.
we, so programmed to be on this like hamster wheel
Yeah.
all the time? But yeah, I mean, I don't have the answers. I'm
Mm.
more so just gathering data for now.
Well, I read something recently that hit me right across the head where this person was saying, at one point in your life, it's important to sit down and ask yourself how many Thanksgivings you have left.
Oh my gosh, I know, but I
Uh,
kind of hate that.
I hate it too. I hate
Okay.
it too. But at the same time, God, talk about making you stop and pause and think, maybe I
I
shouldn't be
know.
working as much as I do and giving priority to other things. And so it's a balance. I mean, we all sit here and we talk about that hamster wheel. And I think all it is just about being conscious of it. And you're going to have
Yeah.
moments where you get too stuck up in it and you're just, and then other times where you step back and have the awareness to look at yourself and go, okay, maybe I need to, maybe I need to step back. And so now, how are you doing on time? Are you okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I know that we started a little late with my
Yeah.
ability to
Okay.
not know how to record my own podcast. Um, because I got a few questions I really want to get in here today. So we're talking about the idea of having awareness and looking at our lives and knowing kind of what is where we should find that balance. And let's face it, we were also talking about mentors, and so we've got these people in our lives that we've watched do this well and mimicked their own behavior to a certain extent. Knowing that, who is someone in your life that pops up for you that you admire today, and why do you admire that person?
Yeah, interesting. I mean, like in a work sense or in a personal sense?
It could be anything you want. Who's somebody that pops in your mind? You think that person just gets it. They do it right. I love their approach to life, or they're just constantly teaching me something. What is it? Somebody that pops into your mind. I know that from a corporate
I,
perspective, you almost don't want to choose somebody because if people watch this, why didn't she
I
choose
know.
me?
I know. Gosh, I hope they don't watch. You know what? I'd probably have to say some of my friends, if I'm
Hmm.
being honest with you. There's a
Yeah.
certain few of them that probably stick out in my head. Um, and I know there's this whole concept of like, you can't do it all. And I think we've now kind of come to terms with that. I think our generation or my generation anyway was definitely taught, you can have the corporate job and you can be the best mom and you can run marathons and you can do all the things.
Hmm.
And I think you can do it all, but you can't do it all at the same time. There's
No.
things that are going to ebb and flow, and you're not going to be able to give 100% to everything all the time. It's just
Hmm.
it's math and it doesn't work. But I do have some friends that I definitely admire in their ability to just manage and be resilient and handle adversity. And I think I'd have to pick like something particularly from each of them that I think they do really well. Some, in the face of, challenge and adversity, just, coming out with this like incredible strength. And others, just their ability to, prioritize and like focus their time and energy, in the right areas at the right time. And so, I don't know that I necessarily have anyone in my life that I look at and I'm like, whoa, you've got it figured out. Because truthfully, once you start peeling back the layers, nobody really has it figured out. Like we're all kind of struggling with one thing or the other.
Hmm.
Um, and I think different people do different things well at different times. And
Yeah.
so I'm lucky, even like, I talked about my Laurier friendship group. I'm also super grateful. Like I've made some amazing friends in my adult life, whether it's through my kids or through our neighborhood. A lot of people that I can just have like very open and honest conversations with. And yeah, it's nice to get other people's perspectives because I can kind of you can see that there's certain areas, like for example, one of the ladies that I've really built this great friendship with, she took a career pause. I guess it's now being referred to as a power pause, while she had young kids. And, I often look at them and they're always at drop off and pick up, both of them together. They made these like really conscious and admirable decisions to be present when their kids were younger. And I love seeing them at drop off and pick up. They always just seem so relaxed and they're so happy. And like, I'm always like running from the subway with my briefcase over my arm, doing a million things at a time. And I look at them and I'm always just, their life just, I like their decisions. I like the way they made their decisions. Could I have made the same ones? I don't know, but I love it for them. But on the flip side, she's trying to reintegrate into the workforce and it's challenging and it's proving to have its challenges. So I think I think we talked about this earlier, like the more open and honest and vulnerable you are with people, like you can really find out about people's lives. And
Yeah.
so I think I would pick pieces from different people's lives. Like another one of my friends, I love how she's able to prioritize her time. Like she's so good at having a recurring babysitter once a week. She's got dinner plans, or if it's golfing or tennis or whatever it is she's playing, she's just so good at that. And I find myself, taking pieces of like each person's story and like trying to integrate it into mine and like trying to do things better. So yeah, I don't know if I have one particular person, but I love little aspects of so many people in my life.
I love the way that you did that, right? It's like the idea that we can take little pieces of, great things that different people do
Yeah.
and incorporate it into our lives, which I think is a fantastic approach. I always had this idea of a coffee table book, and where you go around the world and you pick like that one thing that one country does just so
Oh God, I love that idea.
right? And that just becomes like a picture of the country, and we learn about what it is that they do really well with their sanitation system, with their public washrooms, or with their libraries, and be
Oh
like,
my God, you need to do that. That's a
I
great.
know. I'm thinking about it. Call it a perfect world. All right. I'll
Yeah,
add it to my list.
I love that.
But
I'll buy a copy.
there you go. You know what? I've got one customer finally. When I think about people in my own life that I've admired over the years, you can't help but think about some of the ones that you have admired who are either A, no longer alive and no longer here, or those that you just don't get to see as much anymore. Distance has created like a barrier. Do you have people that you think of that pop up in your mind that you're just like, I just really sometimes wish that person was here and to advise me or to uplift
Yes.
me? Yeah.
I know I keep talking about my friends too much, but my like very best friend lives far away. We actually just booked a trip to go see her and her family in July. But yeah, she just was like, you just have your person that like you can just
Mhm.
be you, and has seen like so many crazy sides of you and is still there. Like
Yeah.
we met, probably 20-ish, more than 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm aging myself, but yeah, just like the distance is hard, right? When you go from seeing somebody pretty much every day and talking to them every day, and then lives kind of take their course and we all get busy. But yeah, I guess I'd go back to my friends.
Yeah.
Yeah, some of my very best friends are kind of far away, so I don't see them as often as I'd like to.
Yeah.
So yeah, that would
It's
be my.
Well, again, you're just reinforcing the point about having good friendships. And it's
I
nice that you
know.
can pick up when you do see them. But I'm the same boat. I've got a couple of like my closest friends. I started thinking that it was me, all of it, because I started noticing that every time I would have like really close
Moving
friends,
away.
they would move to like I had one that was in Vietnam, one that was in Brazil, another one out in Banff. It just they kept like, I'm like, what's going on here, guys?
Yeah,
You just be honest with me.
I know. Oh, I
So
know. I miss my friends.
Oh, they're so important. I know we're coming to an end here, but I want to ask this. When you look at yourself now, what's something that you want to improve upon? Like, you've done all these great things. You're obviously an amazing person. What do you want to do to like take your game to the next level?
That's a good question. And I guess it kind of touches on some of the other things we talked about, is I'm kind of in this new era where I'm going to spend more time prioritizing me. I think,
Mhm.
I spent my 20s like working really hard on my career and trying to build that out. And then I spent my 30s like building a family, and my kids are at an age where some mornings they will play nicely without screaming at each other so I can have a shower in peace. So we're getting there.
Hmm.
I think that where I'm at now is, finding those kind of like hobbies and things that bring me joy. Because I also often think about, everything that I do is setting an example for my daughter and my son. But I think a lot about the example I'm setting for my daughter, and I just want to make sure that I think it's important as much as you can give everything to your job and to your family, you can only, give so much. I think there's a lot of phrases out there now about you can't give from an empty cup or an
Yeah.
empty hose or whatever it is. And
Hmm.
so I'm going to start spending more time on me and things that bring me joy.
So
Not
important.
that, my job and my family doesn't bring me joy, but just
Mhm.
things that like are more personal to just me alone time.
Yeah.
Um,
That also bring you joy.
that also bring me joy. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
gonna I'm gonna play some golf this summer.
Nice.
Taking tennis lessons. Yeah,
Fun.
all the classic stuff, but just like something so I can have an hour to me.
Well, and whenever you do take care of yourself or give yourself the things that bring you joy, you're just such a better version of
Makes me
yourself and
so
everywhere
happy.
else. You're right. It's like I was walking down the street not too long ago, and I turned to my partner and I said, "You see, look at that person right there." And there was this person sitting on a bench reading a book, and it was a young person, probably in their mid-20s. I said, "That's a thing." I
Yeah,
go, walking out of your apartment or your house, going to find a nice quiet bench, pulling out a book, and just
I
being with
know.
your book. And I have not done that. I used to do that, but I have
Yeah,
not done that for years. I listen to books now, but I'm doing it while driving a car,
yeah.
and you just have to make sure that
Slow
you
down.
are feeding yourself. My favorite way of saying it, you were talking about the cup not being full. My favorite way of saying it, of hearing this was that on a physiological level, the heart actually pumps blood to itself before it pumps blood to any other part of the body.
Mm,
And I thought, Mother Nature knows what she's doing.
yeah,
And so she's saying, you know what? Hey, without this thing, this heart,
yeah,
nothing else is going to work. So organs, just hold tight. I'm taking care of me first. And so
yeah.
I love the way that's saying
Yeah,
it
it's
that way.
hard though, right? I feel like there's just so much happening all the time that it's like hard to just slow down and read a book. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean? It's so
I know.
simple,
Well,
but
and
for
you
some
have to,
reason so hard.
you got to schedule it. I think we're good at scheduling everything else. Why can't we schedule us?
Yeah, I know. Maybe I need
Right?
to try that. Actually, we did. We started that. We've got a calendar, a family calendar. When we go to the gym or we do something, it's like all in there. But yeah, it's
Well,
like consciously like making the effort to like put it in there too.
yeah. You wish you didn't have to do it that way, but if that's what it takes to get there, then
That's what you gotta do.
okay. So last question for you. All right. As a leader at work and in business and in your industry, what is it that you want for the people that you lead? How either do you want to be remembered by them or how do you want to influence them, even long past the time that you're no longer their leader?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've talked about this a fair bit today, but I think I want people to understand that you can be you at work. Um, I think back to when I first started, and I was telling some of my first years about this, that I got a handbook, and it was like telling you how to match your suit. Like your suit had to all match, and your purse had to be neutral colors, and like don't wear nail polish. And like it's kind of insane because this was in like
Wow.
2007.
Right. You
Like
think that's
don't
like
have your nail polish
1960s.
be too bright or too bold. And I do a lot of recruiting for my company, and I was judging this case competition, and some of the girls came up to me afterwards, and they're like, "Oh, I love your outfit," and everybody in the room was dressed in a black suit. And I
Mhm.
said to them, I was like, "Don't feel like you have to dress a certain way. Of course, within means, right?
Sure.
Like it's still a professional, but like throw on a colorful blazer, a colorful shirt, or like express yourself through." Your clothes or whatever it might be. But I want people to feel like they can be themselves at work and that you don't have to put on this face, this corporate kind of face to be successful. And that I think what makes people authentic, and understood and I hope successful is just being you and like bringing you to work versus putting on a face that you think people want to see. And I mean, all within reason. I mean, I think one of my fatal flaws is I sometimes swear too much. So to make sure I put my filter on. But yeah, like I want people to feel like they can be themselves because I think that's what makes the world so interesting is that everybody is so unique and everybody is so different. And, if we're all trying to pretend to be the same person that like fits this kind of corporate mold, then that'd be pretty boring.
I could not agree more. And you said it so well. So thank you for that.
Of course.
So we've made it to the end
Wow.
of this podcast.
My
So
very first podcast.
I got to tell you, I am so honored that I managed to break you into the podcast world.
Yeah.
People are going to see this now, and you're going to be
Oh my
interviewed on
God.
podcasts all around the world. Joe Rogan's going to call you.
Oh my God.
Dax Shepard's going to call you. I'm trying to think who are the ones who had the most popular
I
podcasts.
love Armchair Expert. I was literally listening this morning. He
It
has
is so
Monica
good.
Lewinsky on again.
Oh, I,
Everyone he has on is so good.
it's frustrating to me though that podcasts like that are so long, and yet I understand that they have to be.
I
How can
know.
you need time to get into a meaningful conversation? But I'm like, I
Yeah.
just can't carve out 2 hours. I wish I could, but I love his show.
Yeah, I never listen to the fact check as soon as the
Mhm.
guest goes off. Maybe I should be, but yeah, I love his podcast. I feel like he just gets into such interesting conversations. He's so smart.
He's really smart. Yeah,
He's
the fact that
very, very high IQ and EQ. Like
yeah,
he's a smart guy. I like that's my favorite podcast for sure.
yeah. There's a reason why I think he
It'll
just.
be you one day.
Well, you know what? We got to start somewhere, Andrea. And like without you, I don't think I could get there, to be honest with you. So thank you for being on the show, and thank
Of
you
course.
for diving into something that you kind of didn't really know what you're getting into. And so it says a lot about who you are. And I hope that when people watch this, they really get from this conversation what we want them to get, which is to be their authentic selves, to show up as the true version of who they are at work, and to not be so afraid to have those meaningful human connections with the people that you interact with, whether it's in your work life or in your personal life. We've only got a short life to live, and so we might as well have meaningful connections while we're here.
Yes.
So thank you to you for being on
Of
the show.
course. So nice to see you again.
You too. You too. We'll have to get on a plane again soon.
Yeah.
All right. Well, for those of you who've been watching or listening today, thank you for joining us on You Gotta Meet. I have had Andrea MacDonald on the show. She has been incredible, and we will have other guests just as interesting, hopefully, as she is. And I want to say thank you to all of you for joining. I think I already said that, but I like you so much. I wanted to say it twice. Until our next show, keep having those meaningful human connections.